In a small upscale restaurant tucked away in a wealthy southern town, the clinking of silverware and low hum of quiet conversation filled the evening air. Waiters moved like shadows between tables, balancing drinks and dishes with the precision of seasoned performers. The low lights reflected off crystal glasses, and in the corner, a jazz trio played soft melodies that added a touch of elegance to the already refined atmosphere. Then came the interruption. A sharp clink, clink, clink rang out above the music, cutting through conversations like a blade. One of the waiters mid-order halted as every eye shifted toward the source, a man in a tailored charcoal suit, leaning back in his chair with confidence that bordered on smugness. His name was Franklin Dietz, and in that town, his name carried weight like a last name chiseled into marble. His wealth came from oil insurance or maybe old tobacco money, no one really knew, and Franklin liked it that way. Everything about him screamed privilege. His gestures were exaggerated, his voice too loud, and his smile just a little too proud. To the staff, he was more than a regular. He was a reminder that power came with noise. That night, Franklin was celebrating yet another business deal gone his way. He was surrounded by two gray-haired partners and a younger man in a navy blazer who laughed too hard at his jokes. There were empty wine bottles on the table, the kind that quietly cost a mortgage payment. The band played on, undisturbed by the commotion, until Franklin decided he wanted something else. His eyes scanned the room casually until they landed on her. Alisa. She was a slim, young black woman in her early 20s, shoulders slightly hunched from hours on her feet. Her curly brown hair was pulled back in a neat ponytail, her apron tied perfectly around a crisp white shirt. Alisa moved quickly and quietly, the kind of worker managers loved. Never late, never dramatic, just efficient and polite. She didn't belong to the world Franklin inhabited, and perhaps deep down that was exactly why he called out to her. "It's too quiet in here," he boomed, raising his glass as if delivering a toast. "I bet our lovely waitress can spice things up. Can you play the piano, sweetheart?" His voice laced on that last word, stretching it like taffy. Sweet on the outside, sticky and condescending underneath. A few chuckles flickered from his table. One of the older men looked slightly uncomfortable but said nothing. Some heads turned toward Alisa, now frozen mid-step with a glass of water in her hand. Her eyes flicked to the grand piano in the corner, then to the bar where her manager stood, watching. She didn't need to look twice to know there would be no rescue. Her manager, a man who prided himself on not rocking boats, stayed rooted behind the counter. His jaw was tight, but his hands stayed by his sides. Franklin wasn't done. "Come on," he said with a grin like a fishing hook. "Don't be shy, give us a show. Can't say no to a little song, can you?" There was something about the way he said it, like her refusal would somehow confirm all the stereotypes he secretly wanted to believe. As if her silence would amuse him just as much as a performance. A light buzz ran across the room. Phones were already out, held low but recording nonetheless. Not for protection, those screens weren't shields. They were just audience tickets. Alisa's heart thudded in her chest. For a moment all she wanted was for someone else to intervene, to tell him to stop, to speak up on her behalf, to say that this wasn't acceptable, that she was here to work, not to perform for people who thought her existence was entertainment. But no one said a word. She placed the water glass quietly on a tray and took a small breath. Her hands trembled as she left her station and slowly walked across the room, her shoes tapping softly against the polished hardwood floor. She passed tables filled with people pretending not to watch, pretending not to be part of it. She reached the piano. It was a glossy black grand, untouched and glistening beneath a flickering chandelier. Alisa sat on the bench. Her spine was straight now. Palms rested against her lap for a moment before she raised them and placed them gently on the keys. Her fingers hovered for a second and the room, once loud, now tense and quiet, waited as if something sacred was about to happen. Nobody knew what she would play. Most expected something mediocre. A few expected mistakes. But what came next would not only collapse their expectations. It would silence the entire room. Alisa sat at the grand piano, her hands hovering just above the keys, her spine straight and her eyes calm. The chatter in the restaurant, once full of half-drunken laughter and casual conversations, settled into an uneasy silence. Even the jazz band had gone quiet, watching her from their corner stage. For a brief moment no one moved. Even Franklin, now leaning forward with an annoyed smirk on his face, seemed unsure of the performance he'd just demanded. He had expected hesitation, maybe a clumsy tune, or a laughable attempt at music that he could turn into another cruel joke to entertain his table. He didn't expect poise. He didn't expect silence. And he definitely didn't expect what was about to follow. Alisa gently touched the keys, letting her fingers glide with the grace of muscle memory born from years of practice. And then she played. From the very first note, the room changed. The sound that poured from the piano was neither timid nor impersonal. It was bold, honest, deep, not flashy or showy like the jazz tunes that usually filled the air here, but something far more intimate. A melody that seemed to rise from the floor itself, echoing through the marble walls and glass chandeliers like a quiet storm. The music was rich, liquid smooth like river water running over rocks at dusk. Melancholy tinged every note, but so did strength. It was the kind of sound you didn't expect to hear outside a concert hall. Definitely not in a restaurant. Definitely not from someone who had just been handed a tray of cocktails 5 minutes earlier. Alisa didn't need sheet music. Her eyes weren't even on the keys. She closed them slowly, as if not to block the world out, but to hold something inside. Each key she pressed felt like it carried a truth, some long-held sorrow mixed with an unbreakable dignity. She didn't falter. Her hands moved with uncanny grace, like they belonged to someone else. Someone who had once played in sanctuaries or silent living rooms touched by candlelight. Every rise in the melody felt right. Every fall deliberate. It wasn't just music. It was a confession wrapped in sound. A story told in another language. People forgot to breathe. Forks hung midair. Waiters stood still in the corners. At Franklin's table, the spectacle he had engineered was collapsing in front of him. His celebratory arrogance had melted into something more anxious, more uncertain. The smirk on his lips faded inch by inch, one note at a time. His hand, once confidently gripping a glass of champagne, now hovered in front of him, forgotten. His business associates weren't laughing anymore. The man in the navy blazer with the loud laugh now had his mouth slightly open, stunned. Even the older gentleman beside Franklin, who had chuckled awkwardly when the pianist joke was first made, now stared wide-eyed at Alisa, his brow furrowed, not with pity but respect. As the song continued, the emotional weight in the room grew thicker. Alisa was bearing pieces of her soul, and no one had the right to look away. Her song weaved through emotions that couldn't be put into words: sorrow, survival, longing, love. But above all, there was resistance in it. A soft, powerful defiance. She was telling them who she was, and who they had underestimated. She wasn't a performer summoned for amusement. She wasn't the shy little sweetheart someone could drag to the spotlight with a demeaning smile. She was an artist, and she owned that piano, that moment, and every single eye in the room. And not just that, she owned their silence. For in that space no one dared move. It wasn't fear anymore. It was awe. They weren't holding their breaths in discomfort. They were holding them in reverence. Perhaps for the very first time in their lives, they were seeing someone truly real, vulnerable, and unapologetically talented. Right there in front of them where they least expected it. Alisa struck the final notes like the closing lines of a powerful poem. The sound lingered, drifting gently across the hushed room before falling away like the last light before dusk. Then came stillness. Not immediate applause, no. It was too holy for that. Too raw. The silence after her final note held weight, the kind that doesn't ask for clapping. It asks for reflection. And in that silence Alisa stood. She didn't bow. She didn't smile. She didn't wait for praise or recognition. She simply turned, walked away from the piano, and disappeared back toward the kitchen like she'd done nothing out of the ordinary. Only then one soft clap from the back broke the trance. Then another. And then all at once the entire room erupted in applause. Not the polite kind, not the restaurant kind, but the kind of thunderous, standing ovation that only comes when the heart has been moved unexpectedly. Alisa didn't look back. She didn't need to. She had already said everything with her hands. When Alisa struck the final note, it echoed through the restaurant like the last syllable of a powerful speech. It drifted gently from the keys, hung in the air for a heartbeat, and then slowly faded away, leaving behind a silence so deep it felt sacred. It was not the kind of silence that follows awkwardness or confusion. It was the kind that follows revelation. The kind that says, something extraordinary just happened. No one moved. Not the guests. Not the waiters. Not even the kitchen staff peeking through the small service window. Time seemed to have stalled somewhere between awe and disbelief. Conversations that had once filled the room died in mid-sentence. Phones lowered. Forks remained frozen mid-air. For a second it almost felt as if the air had gone still. No one, it seemed, had expected her to be capable of producing something like that. Alisa slowly removed her hands from the keys, letting them rest silently in her lap. She didn't look around for approval. She didn't bow. She didn't smile. She just sat there quietly for a moment, letting the music's aftermath have the space it deserved. Franklin, who had summoned her to the piano like a court jester, was no longer smirking. His glass, which moments ago had hovered between his fingers like a token of power, now dangled carelessly in his limp hand. His face had turned noticeably pale, not with shame perhaps, but certainly with discomfort. He had intended to create a scene, a moment of amusement at someone else's expense. But instead, he had handed the spotlight to someone who turned it into something real, something so authentic, so raw, that it tore through the artificiality of the evening like sunlight through a dense fog. Alisa rose from the piano bench with a grace that betrayed none of the emotions roiling inside her. Not anger. Not pride. Not even vindication. Just stillness. She lifted her chin and calmly walked away, through the same room that had moments earlier been filled with stifled laughter, mockery, and silent judgment. Now all that remained was stunned quiet. She returned to the service area without fuss, quietly tying her apron again behind the bar. Her steps were slow but deliberate, and she held her posture with dignity. No grand exit. No gloating. She had not performed for applause. Her music was not offered as a performance, it was a statement. And then something shifted. In the back corner of the restaurant, a man seated beside his partner slowly brought his hands together. A soft, hesitant clap. Not loud. Not demanding. Just genuine. A moment later, his partner joined him. Then another guest nearby. And another. Within seconds, that tentative rhythm grew into something more. A dozen clapping hands became dozens more. The quiet transformed into a steady, swelling ovation. Chairs scraped against the floors as people began to rise. Some in respect, others in apology for the silence that came too late. Still, she didn't turn around. She continued tidying the bar with the same precision she always had. She folded a napkin, checked a receipt, straightened a glass. They clapped louder. Not a single clap came from Franklin's table. He remained seated, one hand still limp around his now warm drink, the other resting lifelessly on the linen-covered table. The men around him avoided eye contact, no longer sure whether to sit or leave or simply vanish. Franklin sat in the middle of the very applause that should have belonged to him, if only in ridicule. Instead, all of it belonged to the young woman he tried to embarrass. His moment of fun had become someone else's triumph, and he knew it. He had handed her a stage, thinking it was a joke, and she performed so powerfully that the audience forgot who the joke was supposed to be about. In that moment, power shifted. Alisa didn't need a podium, a microphone, or a trending hashtag. She said more about dignity, identity, and strength with a piano in 5 minutes than most people say in a lifetime with a megaphone. No interviews. No protests. Just a girl, a piano, and everything she'd ever needed to express. The ovation lasted long after she disappeared into the kitchen. And still she didn't turn back. Not even once. She didn't need to. Because sometimes silence is the loudest answer. And grace, the kind that stares down humiliation and walks away unshaken, is louder than any insult could ever hope to be. She had come into the room a waitress. She left as something far greater. A reminder. A reminder that dignity has no uniform. And that talent, no matter where it's hidden, will always find a way to rise. What the restaurant crowd didn't know that night was that Alisa's story began long before she ever set foot in that upscale dining room. Her journey with music started in a small, weathered house on the outskirts of a rural Mississippi town, where the air was thick with the scent of magnolias and the sound of gospel hymns drifting from the local church. Her grandmother, a woman of quiet strength and deep faith, was the church pianist. She played every Sunday, her fingers gliding over the keys with a grace that seemed to lift the spirits of everyone in the congregation. From the age of 5, Alisa would sit beside her grandmother on the old, battered piano bench. The instrument itself was nothing special. Its wood was scratched, some keys stuck, and the pedals squeaked, but to Alisa it was a treasure. Her grandmother's hands, worn from years of work, would guide her small fingers over the keys, teaching her not just the notes, but the feeling behind them. "Music isn't just about playing the right notes, baby," her grandmother would say. "It's about telling your story, even when you don't have the words." Alisa learned quickly. She had a natural ear for melody and a patience that belied her age. She practiced every day after school, sometimes for hours, losing herself in the music. She dreamed of one day playing in grand concert halls, of wearing elegant dresses and hearing her name announced to a crowd that had come just to listen to her. She imagined her grandmother in the front row, beaming with pride. But life, as it often does, had other plans. When Alisa was 16, tragedy struck. Her parents were killed in a car accident, leaving her and her younger brother, Marcus, alone in the world. Overnight, Alisa went from being a teenager with dreams to the head of a household. She took on 2 part-time jobs, balancing schoolwork with the responsibilities of raising her brother. The dreams of concert halls and standing ovations faded into the background, replaced by the urgent needs of daily survival. Still, she never let go of music. Late at night, after Marcus had gone to bed and the apartment was quiet, Alisa would slip on her headphones and play. Sometimes she played on a cheap keyboard she'd found at a thrift store. Sometimes she just tapped out rhythms on the kitchen table. The music was her refuge, a place where she could pour out her grief, her exhaustion, and her hope. It was a way to stay connected to her grandmother, who had passed away a year after her parents. In those moments, Alisa felt less alone. She carried that music with her everywhere, even when she started working as a waitress to help pay for community college. The restaurant was a world away from the church in Mississippi, but the lessons her grandmother taught her stayed close to her heart. She worked hard, kept her head down, and tried not to draw attention to herself. She knew the world could be unkind, especially to someone like her, a young black woman with big dreams and little means. So when Franklin, with all his arrogance and entitlement, singled her out that night, Alisa felt the old sting of being underestimated. She recognized the look in his eyes, the way he saw her as entertainment, not as a person. But as she sat at the piano, she remembered her grandmother's words. She remembered the music that had carried her through every hardship, every loss, every moment of doubt. She didn't just play a song that night. She played her life. Every note was a memory. The warmth of her grandmother's embrace, the ache of losing her parents, the weight of responsibility, the quiet moments of hope. She played for her ancestors, for the struggles they endured and the strength they passed down to her. She played for her brother, for the future she still hoped to give him. She played for herself, for the dreams she refused to let die. And as the last note faded, Alisa reminded everyone in that room of a truth they had forgotten. Dignity cannot be mocked. No matter how the world tries to diminish you, your worth is not up for debate. In that moment, Alisa's music spoke louder than any insult, any laughter, any attempt to belittle her. She stood as a testament to resilience, to the power of holding on to your story, and to the unbreakable spirit that lives in all of us. Word spread fast, as it always does in the age of smartphones and social media. The night after Alisa's unforgettable performance, a grainy video began circulating online. Someone had captured the entire moment on their phone, from Franklin's smug challenge to the stunned silence that followed Alisa's final note. The video was shaky, the audio imperfect, but the emotion was unmistakable. You could hear the hush that fell over the room, see the expressions of awe and disbelief, and most importantly, witness the transformation of a moment meant for humiliation into one of pure, undeniable triumph. Within hours, the video was shared across platforms: Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. By the next morning, it had racked up over 1 million views. The headline that accompanied it was as direct as it was powerful: Waitress silences rich man's racist joke with beautiful piano solo. People everywhere were captivated by the story. Comments poured in from around the world, praising Alisa's talent, her composure, and her quiet strength. Strangers called her an inspiration, a role model, a reminder of the dignity that can shine through even the darkest moments. Alisa's phone began to buzz with notifications she never expected. Local news outlets wanted to interview her. Reporters called the restaurant, hoping to get a statement or a quote. A nearby music academy, moved by her story and her obvious talent, reached out with an offer that made her heart skip a beat. A full scholarship to study piano, no strings attached. For the first time in years, the dream she thought she'd lost was suddenly within reach. But the attention didn't stop there. A talent agency in New York, known for discovering and nurturing young musicians, sent her an email. They had seen the video and wanted to talk about her future, about concerts, recordings, and opportunities she had only ever imagined in her quietest moments. The world, it seemed, had finally heard the music she'd been playing in the shadows for so long. Meanwhile, the story took a very different turn for Franklin Dietz. The internet, with its long memory and sharp sense of justice, was not kind to him. His name quickly became a symbol of old-school arrogance and casual cruelty. People dug up stories of his past behavior, shared their own experiences, and called for boycotts of his businesses. Memes and hashtags spread, mocking his attempt to belittle someone and the way it had so spectacularly backfired. Franklin tried to do damage control. He issued a public apology, carefully worded and delivered through his lawyer. He claimed he hadn't meant any harm, that it was all a misunderstanding, that he respected Alisa's talent. But the apology rang hollow. The world had already seen his true character, exposed in a moment he could never take back. No amount of PR spin could erase the image of him sitting pale and silent, as the room erupted in applause for the woman he tried to embarrass. Through it all, Alisa remained remarkably grounded. She didn't gloat or seek revenge. She didn't post angry messages or bask in the downfall of the man who had tried to humiliate her. Instead, she went back to work the following week with the same quiet politeness and grace she had always shown. She greeted customers with a smile, took orders and cleared tables as if nothing had changed. But everything had changed. Her co-workers looked at her with new respect. Customers came in just to see her, to thank her, to tell her how much her story had meant to them. The restaurant owner, once content to stay silent, now spoke proudly of the young woman who had put their little establishment on the map for all the right reasons. Alisa's life was no longer defined by struggle and sacrifice alone. The world had seen her, not just as a waitress, but as an artist, a survivor, and a symbol of resilience. The dreams she had set aside for so long were now alive again, brighter than ever. One act of attempted humiliation had become a story of triumph. One cruel joke had turned into a lesson about dignity, hidden greatness, and the power of standing tall in the face of adversity. And the girl who once thought her dreams had passed her by? Suddenly, people were calling her their modern-day Nina Simone. A voice for those who had been silenced, a reminder that true talent and character will always find a way to shine. And as Alisa sat at her piano, practicing late into the night, she knew that her story was only just beginning. If this story moved you, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to our channel for more inspiring stories just like this one. Share your thoughts in the comments below. What would you have done in Alisa's shoes? Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video. What happens when a powerful man tries to humiliate a young waitress in front of a crowd, only to have her silence the entire room with a single song? This is a story you'll never forget.